Hey there, Ray Corcoran here. In this week's video, we're going to be going over buyer's agents, also known as buyer's advocates. Should you use them? How much do they cost? What are the pros? What are the cons? And basically explain, what's the go with buyer's agents and should you bother with them? And if you do find this video useful, please give it a like. It does help it push out to more people and get more visibility for the channel. And if you want to subscribe. And if you don't, then you don't. So firstly, what is a buyer's agent? So basically a buyer's agent will be someone that buys a property on your behalf. So they'll help you buy the property. They'll help you negotiate the property, find the right one. It could either be for residential, it can be for commercial, it can be for an investment property, it can be for PPOR, principal place of residence, a home you live in. I've personally used a buyer's agent 3 times for 3 of our investment properties. One of the main reasons was, one, when I first started buying property, I didn't know anything really. I had no real base of knowledge. And one of my clients in my marketing agency recommended a buyer's agent, and they kind of specialize in buying regional, good quality investment properties. So at the time, around 2018, we bought our first investment property and it was really, really good. It saved us a heap of time. I learned a lot in the process, and all 3 properties have performed really well. So for someone that doesn't know a lot and does have the money to spend, I personally found it very, very useful. But it does depend on your situation. So I'm going to go into a few more pros and cons and help you sort of weigh up whether it's a good choice for you or not. So in terms of the pros, there's a bunch of them. So 1, they save you time. 2, a good one will be better than you at finding a good investment property. 3, they can help with negotiation. 4, they can go to auction for you, so they can bid on your behalf at auction. Number 5 is they have so many good relationships with agents. A good buyer's agent, and not all of them are good, but a good one will have lots of relationships with agents, either in their region that they're investing in or all across the country. They'll have people that, because if you think about it, a real estate agent, they just want to move heaps of property and make heaps of money, basically. So if they have a buyer's agent that keeps buying from them over and over and over again, they know that they're reliable. They know that their clients are reliable and they'll make sure the deal goes through. They're not going to be flaky. Then a lot of agents will sell a property, but sometimes not even for the highest bid, because they know that they're going to be a sure thing. There's no dramas, and they're going to be easy to deal with. They work with them all the time. Another thing is off-market properties. So often because of these relationships, they'll be able to get you off-market properties that aren't listed online, whether it's domain.com.au or realestate.com.au. They'll get early access to stuff. And that means that you may get a shot at that property without all the competition of having it listed online or have it going to auction. And they can also recommend good suppliers in terms of mortgage brokers, conveyancers, building and pest inspections, and so on. In terms of cons, they can cost a lot of money. So, I've paid for the 3 times I used a buyer's agent, we paid $13,000 each time. Now, the way I kind of rationalized it was that $13,000 over the life of a 30-year loan, I think it was like $500 a year or something. The way that I kind of rationalized it was, well, if I don't know, especially for the first one, if I don't know anything about property, and these guys have done this a million times before, the chances of that property performing, the property that they would have picked versus what I probably would have picked, which would have been crap, would easily outperform the $500 annually that I would have kind of paid for their services. And, these properties have done way better than that. And I kind of was, I was ahead after like 12 months. And I'm not saying that you would have that situation, but all these properties have done well. And I simply I would have not been able to get those results myself with that knowledge that I had, or limited knowledge that I had at that time. And for me, I also think about it in terms of the opportunity cost. For me, I'm good at my business. I know how to make money through my business and deliver my services because that's my strength. For me to be spending all this time on the property stuff doesn't really make sense just to save a few $1,000s. I can make way more than that with the time that I spend in my business, playing to my strengths versus me trying to be a property expert in like 2 months to try and buy a property. In terms of specific fees, I paid $13,000 all inclusive, including GST. I've seen some people do it for $8,000, $10,000, some of as high as $15,000. So the fees can fluctuate. Also, it depends on, sometimes the more expensive properties they'll actually charge a percentage. So that can get pretty expensive. But if they're buying a, multi-million-dollar property for someone, then the fees could be, a few percent of that, and it can be quite substantial. Some of them also do once-off fees, per auction that they go to. So all of them charge kind of slightly differently, but that's sort of generally how it'll work. Most places you pay 10 to 15K for like a 500 grand investment property. That's what we did, but it can vary a lot depending on who you go with. The second con is that not all buyer's agents are actually good. Some of them actually, they won't ever say this to you, but some of them are just better at just doing the transaction and saving you time. But in terms of finding a good investment grade property, some of them are terrible. And they won't tell you that they're terrible. They'll just be like, yeah, we can buy you something, but they'll just buy you any old junk. And if you want to save time, that's okay. But if you're trying to save time, but also get expertise to get a good quality property, some of these buyer's agents are terrible. And some of them get their credentials from a cereal box, to be honest. There's not a lot of certification in this industry. And you can become a buyer's agent without too much actual study or experience, to be honest. So you've got to be really wary of that. Some of them have great marketing, but there's a number of questions which I'll go into in a sec that you can ask them and help sort of ascertain whether they're going to be a good one or a bad one. Obviously the fee. So if you haven't got that much money, the fee can be a downside, to pay $15,000. If you're looking to buy your first property, $15,000 can be a really large amount of money. Well, it is anyway, but it can be a large amount of money relative to, if you're only trying to buy a $300,000 property, like an entry-level property, for you to pay another, $15,000 to get some help, sometimes that can't be worth it when you don't have that much money, but two, if the buyer's agent isn't that good, you won't even recoup that money in the long term. So that's just something to keep in mind. And it's worth shopping around in terms of buyer's agents. Another con is that they can get overloaded. So some of these buyer's agents, can get to a point where everybody's trying to buy property. Like recently, it's a hot market. We used a buyer's agent. The first 2 times it was good. Third time it took forever. And honestly, I felt like I was wasting my time. And I kind of wish that we almost didn't go with them to an extent, because they had a huge wait in between us signing up and us actually getting a property. Now, some people would say, well, they're waiting to get the right quality property for us. And I was okay with that. However, they didn't even look at buying, they didn't present us a property for a few months after buying. So because they had a big queue of people. That's a good thing, I guess, because they're getting customers. They must be somewhat decent if they're so busy, but they don't really set very good expectations. They said it was gonna be a little bit longer, ended up being dramatically longer than kind of what they had quoted. And yeah, it was very frustrating. And it also, slowed down our plans to buy a family home, which we've since done, because we had to wait till that was all settled and finalized, and they had to find a property and get it all done and settled before we could start the next one. So it can kind of hold up all your life plans if you're with someone that has a huge queue. So just keep that in mind when you're speaking to them. In terms of when you go to hire a buyer's agent, there's a number of questions that I would recommend you asking. They may not answer all of them, but it's good to ask the question and just kind of get a gauge on how they respond. One of them can be, how many properties have you guys bought for your clients over what time period? If they can only say like, I bought 10 properties over the last 2 years, it might not be a bad thing, but it's just interesting to keep in mind. They may be newer to being a buyer's agent, or they may have a huge portfolio themselves and they just got into a buyer's agent business. So they may have lots of experience, but in terms of their company, maybe not that much experience. So just keep that in mind. One thing that I like to ask them is, how many properties do they personally own? Now, you may not get an answer for this one, but I do like to ask them and see, some of these people don't practice what they preach. They might have their house and one other property or 2 other properties. You may have more properties than them. And that's been the case. I've spoken to some where I'm like, I kind of felt like you don't even do this for yourself very often. So it kind of seems a bit hypocritical in my opinion. Now, you won't always get an answer, but I like to ask a question. Some will tell you, some won't. The next one is, I like to ask, what criteria do you use to decide the areas that you invest in? Now, a lot of them will kind of spit out the same old stuff. Vacancy rates, infrastructure projects planned, general projects planned, population changes. There's going to be a whole bunch of things, but ask the question anyway, because you might find big differences between what some people say and what others say. And I like to ask, out of those criteria, what are the most important criteria do you feel in terms of selecting an area? And you'll be able to compare what people say, and you might get some information that puts you off one person versus the other. But I like to really understand, what is their thought process behind picking that place? Why did you pick it? What makes it good or bad to you? And what weightings do you put on different factors? Some people have, vacancy rates, a major one. Other people, they don't really pay it too much attention. The next thing as well is what kind of data and evidence are you using to support your decision? So some of these people will be very, very blasé about it, and some of them don't use a lot of data and research and evidence to actually make these decisions. Personally, I think that's a bit of a red flag. If I was buying a property for someone, I would want to be able to show that like, here are the reasons why we like this area. You know, this number's gone from here to here, this number's gone up. These numbers are, you know, jobs growth is at an all-time high, whatever it is. But there should be specific reasons rather than just, you know, trust me, bro. Basically, some of them are just like, yeah, no, it's a heaps good area. And then they're kind of, there's no real clear reasons why. And for me, that's a concern. And, you know, should be for you as well. And also not just in terms of area, but also in terms of specific house in that area. So ask them, you know, what their criteria is for the house. You know, what are you kind of typically looking for in terms of land size, in terms of the type of, you know, block shape, how level the block is, how many bedrooms and bathrooms. Do you have any minimum criteria that you like to do? In terms of distance from major infrastructure, is there any particular things, transport, any stuff that you would not buy, or any kind of, you know, subsections of a region that you would not buy for whatever reason. It's good to ask these questions and ask a lot of questions, because some of these people will be very, very blasé about their approach, and then, you know, they're often the ones that aren't as good. In terms of how to find one, you know, you can look online, search Google, look for ones that have, you know, lots of good Google reviews. Ask friends, family, if you have, you know, clients or co-workers, you know, ask around, get a bunch of names. Have you used one? How many times have you used them? Obviously, if they've bought multiple properties through a person, that, you know, that could be a good sign that they had a good experience. And speak to a lot of them. Don't just speak to one and get started. Speak to a few of them. You'll get a quick idea over who's probably going to do a better job versus another. And my final tip is around use your buyer's agent as a real estate training guide. So for me, when I'm using a buyer's agent, I never had the intention of using a buyer's agent long term. We used it for the first 3. But we haven't used one since, and I don't plan to probably in future unless I get extremely busy for some reason and it's just, I just want to have someone else do it for me. It's a really, really good way for you to learn about property, learn about what criteria for picking an area, what criteria for picking a specific house. And, you know, I've asked lots of questions in terms of what would you consider a good vacancy rate? What would you consider a good enough land size? You know, in terms of location, what are the good things? What are the bad things about a certain house? I wasn't asking that because I was curious for that specific house. I was asking because I wanted to find out what their process is, to be honest, so I could implement that myself. And I've taken information from different parties to sort of form my own thesis and approach for my property investing. And for me, I think that's one of the best benefits. Paying them for one property is great. You know, you get your learnings, whatever, but the long-term learnings are actually, I think, the most valuable part about using a good buyer's agent. So I hope you found that useful. Hopefully that kind of demystifies a bit about buyer's agents. I've tried to keep this relatively short and sharp, so then you just get the info that you need. If you like the video, please give a like, and if you want to subscribe for more videos like this, please consider it.